evening, everyone. We're going to get started, so if you could find your seat, that would be fantastic. And for people who are coming in, be sure and grab a handout with a QR. Explain in a bit. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Mary Morgan. I'm with Heading Home of South Central Indiana. We are a relatively new initiative that's working to strengthen housing security and make homelessness rare, brief, and non-repeating. I encourage you to go to our website at headinghomeindiana.org to learn more. And we are delighted to put this event together on the important issues of low-income housing and homelessness with our many partners who are here tonight. And I'm just going to name them because they're awesome. Bloomington Multi-Faith Alliance. Is anybody here from the Multi-Faith Alliance? Maybe not yet. Oh, yay! Thank you for coming. Our other co-hosts are the Boys and Girls Club of Bloomington, which contributed this beautiful venue. Yay to them. The Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, IU PACE, which is Political and Civic Engagement, South Central Community Action Program. I know you're representing. The South Central Housing Network, and United Way of Monroe County. Please give our co-hosts a round of applause. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank our election committee, several of you are here, that helped us organize this event, and of course the amazing volunteers who made this happen, all of this setup happen in less than 30 minutes. So please give them a round of applause too. Thank you. The handout that I mentioned contains important information about the May 2nd primary, so please take a look at that. There's a QR code that'll take you to a page with more information. A reminder that the deadline to register to vote is April 3rd for the May 2nd primary, and early voting starts on April 4th. So tonight's forum is our chance for the community to learn about plans and positions for our 3 mayoral candidates in the May 2nd primary, to learn about what they think about these important community issues. I thank you all for coming tonight. We're looking forward to the discussion. Leon Gordon, Administrative Director with the Bloomington Housing Authority, right here, is going to be our co-moderator. Also served on our election committee, so we're grateful to you. And just a little bit about the format. We are being recorded by CATS tonight and some other media. The candidates will have 1 minute to make their opening statements, then 90 seconds per question, and another minute for closing statements at the end. Our 2 lovely timekeepers up here are going to alert the candidates when there's 30 seconds, holding up a piece of paper that says 30 seconds. And then, at the end of the time, we're going to do the bell. It's all about the bell. Do you want to give it a trial run? Yeah, that's golden tones. Okay. We solicited questions from the public prior to this event, and we also asked candidates to have questions that they could ask the audience. So when you came in, you had your handout. There was a QR code and a web address if your phone doesn't read QR codes. Hopefully you have all taken that questionnaire. There are 3 questions, 1 per candidate, and during the evening tonight, we're going to announce the results of those questions, your answers to those questions. All right, so now we are going to start with opening statements, and we'll start with Don Griffin Jr. and go to Susan, and then Kerry.
Is it on? It's on, okay. I'm Don Griffin. I'm a 52-year Bloomington resident. This is where I grew up. I'm the son of Donald Griffin and Marlene Griffin, a police officer and a secretary. I'm the brother of Marcella and Marisha, and I am the husband of Nicole and the father of Dexter. I've been your deputy mayor for the last 2 years. I've sold real estate for 30 years before that. I am Bloomington, and I'm asking you to believe in Bloomington. But I can't do it alone. Together, we will be a more sustainable Bloomington. Together, we will create a more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and accessible community of belonging. Together, we will create more housing opportunities for all. Together, we will help lift up our economy and cultural growth. I'm Don Griffin, and I want to be your next mayor. Believe in Bloomington.
Good evening and thank you. I'm Susan Sandberg, running for mayor of Bloomington because I know we can do better with collaborative leadership. After 16 years as an elected official on the City Council, I'm ready to manage our nearly $230 million budget to prioritize solutions for problems we face as a caring community. Leading my vision for a better Bloomington are 4 priority platforms: public safety, affordability, collaboration, and essential city services. Tonight, I look forward to discussing affordable housing, which means different things to people at different income levels. But one thing is clear. The inability to afford housing in Bloomington is a driver of the increases in people experiencing homelessness. I'm eager to continue my long track record of support in both the public and nonprofit sectors to facilitate better ways to expand supportive housing and rapid rehousing. I will work hard to better incentivize the development of affordable housing in Bloomington. Thank you.
I'm Kerry Thomson, and more than 25 years ago, I chose Bloomington as my hometown because this is an incredible city, and I think we deserve a government that's just as incredible. That's why I'm running for mayor. I spent 20 years as the CEO of Habitat for Humanity here in Monroe County. I actually helped co-found the South Central Indiana Housing Network. And for all of my life, I have been working at the intersection of challenge and possibility to ensure that people have decent, affordable places to live. I now direct the Center for Rural Engagement, where I'm working with nearly 90 different communities. I'm running to bring people back to the table in our city government, to address our skyrocketing housing costs, and to ensure that we have public safety and mental health care for those who are most in crisis.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're going to move into some general questions, and we'll start with Susan and then Kerry and Don. The first question is, what kind of experience, either personal or professional, do you have with housing insecurity? And how will that experience inform your decision-making as mayor?
Thank you. My experience with housing insecurity comes from a lot of engagement with local nonprofit organizations. As a member of the City Council, of course, we host many programs, the Jack Hopkins Social Services Program, our CDBG block grants for social services, and as such, we have an opportunity to interact with a great array of the incredible nonprofits that we have in this community that are serving the community in low-income populations with food security, housing, healthcare, childcare, an array of nonprofits who come to us to ask for grants and grant support. I am happy to do that. I've also volunteered. I have been a member of the board of the South Central Community Action Program, served as its president. I've volunteered with New Leaf, New Life in the Monroe County Jail, and I am very much involved with assisting any number of people who are, again, doing great service in our community, working with low-income populations.
Nothing rattles the human soul like housing insecurity. We all need a place that we know we can go home to and restore ourselves. After a major water leak in December, my own family experienced brief housing insecurity when we had to move our family of 7 suddenly out of our home. We're fortunate enough that we pieced together a solution that would work. But I know from my more than 30 years as either CEO or volunteering with Habitat that those resources aren't available to everybody. And if we can't offer opportunity and hope to people before they become unhoused, it's much, much more difficult to solve the problem. My experience with housing insecurity is vast. I have worked in partnership with more than 100 families. I know their stories. I know that there's no one single bullet that's going to actually solve this challenge. I also know there are a myriad of stories that lead to housing insecurity. As a community, we can solve this challenge together, but we must come together with leaders like Heading Home, with our incredible nonprofit network. What we can do together is much greater than any one of us can do alone.
Personal stories. You know, I was born with working class parents. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a secretary. And there were struggles. There were struggles trying to figure out whether or not we were going to eat or, you know, heat the house. So I watched my parents struggle. I then struggled as a beginning business owner, where I had to decide whether or not I was going to pay my bills or keep the heat on or feed a 2-year-old. So I've been there. And it's been my passion to make sure others have a place to call home, whether that's as a real estate agent who has done over $500,000 in sales focused on affordable housing and first-time home buyers, or a board member for Habitat and other folks who are in the process, plus as a deputy mayor, helping others and other community members reach out and try to create more affordable housing. This is what I'll continue to do as mayor.
All right, thank you. Our next question. Residents from some Bloomington neighborhoods have a strong voice in shaping city policy. This forum is taking place in the Crestmont neighborhood. How will you engage residents from this part of the city and other neighborhoods that are typically unrepresented when making public policy? And we'll start with Kerry, Don, and then...
Very simply by going to them. City Hall serves an entire city, and we need to recognize that not everybody can come to City Hall, especially not during City Hall hours. I used to live in this neighborhood. I lived at 11th and Lindbergh, and then I lived at 14th and Lindbergh. This is a great neighborhood with great people in it, and they deserve to be heard. And frequently, we set our city hours based on traditional 9-to-5 kinds of work jobs. We need to recognize that people need the city to come to them, and we also need to innovate around how we listen to people and how we engage them. For some, we can use technology to do this, but for others, we need to show up at block parties, and we need to go to the meetings that they already are attending and ensure that we are listening there and that we're doing the outreach, not expecting folks to come to the city. This is the way that I worked for years at Habitat, going to the neighbors, going to the homeowners, and working in partnership, side by side. That's what I'll continue to do as your mayor.
You know, we need to make sure that people are actually in the building. We talk a lot about serving people and who we serve, but we need to make sure that the people who are actually serving look like the ones that are being served. And that means bringing people into a building that is theirs. They are citizens like everybody else. No matter how much you make, no matter who you are, the city is yours, and we need to make sure that people feel that way. And the way that you do that is by putting them at the table, having them serve. We too often look at the same people, and it's easy when we're picking board members, it's easy to pick someone who we're used to picking. And so we've got to step outside of that and just make sure that everyone feels like they belong, because they do, right? It is bringing people to a table. We brag about bringing people to a table, but they already own part of that table. We need to remember that.
Outreach is incredibly important, and the city does have a variety of mechanisms already through our various department heads that do outreach to various groups, boards and commissions already been brought up. Personally, when I have been involved with organizations like the South Central Community Action Program, when we were initiating our Affordable Living Committee, in which we were taking a look at the city and seeing what kind of stresses people were facing with affordability. It started out as the Affordable Housing Committee. It ended up being the Affordable Living, because we realized it's not just the cost of housing that's causing people to really be in financial jeopardy. It's the cost of everything: food, shelter, healthcare, childcare, transportation issues. And we outreach to the people who were involved in, at the time it was called the Circles Initiative. I was very much engaged with that at the beginning. It's now called Thriving Connections. We actually spoke with a good number of people involved in that program to get good information about how they were struggling and how they were living. So I, again, as a former Child Protective Services worker who has been accustomed to making home visits with people, families that are vulnerable and in some legal jeopardy, and as mayor, we will make sure that we are accessible, that City Hall is welcoming, and that we are going out into the community. When I say we, I mean everyone who's employed by the city, whose job it is, to make sure that we understand the needs of every single person who lives in this community to help make their lives better.
All right, thank you, candidates. Do you support coordinated funding for programs that address low-income housing, homelessness, and related services? If so, what's your approach to aligning grants from the city, the county, and others to address shared priorities and community needs? And we'll start with Don.
Of course, I support a community-based sharing of resources with city, county, and other entities. One of my ideas is a no wrong door center. That it would be a housing center with conference rooms, and it would focus on homelessness, resource vouchers for Section 8, and first-time home buying. I think just a center, an outgoing center, would be a great idea, instead of having things within an office, but a outside-facing center that would create housing opportunities from the beginning to the end, with a continuation of care and that kind of thing. So yes, more resources, and as deputy mayor, I think we supported heading home with the county as well as the city with about $2.5 million, if I'm not mistaken. So I would continue on with similar programs and ideas.
Coordinated funding is absolutely essential. The city of Bloomington, we all know, is not capable of meeting all the needs with respect to affordable housing and a number of critical issues. So we must combine our forces with our county colleagues, with other grant sources, with state opportunities, and with federal funding. So funding is where it's all at. When you're in the nonprofit sector and you're providing services to low-income folks, I am happy that the city of Bloomington is a good partner when it comes to funding opportunities, either through granting or special programs. There was a consolidated effort to help support the Stride Center, which came online, and of course, to the extent that the city does have funding available to assist in nonprofit efforts, we want to continue that, and we want to look for more. I'm very heartened by the fact that the governor of Indiana seems to have released some additional funding that all of the cities in Indiana should be able to benefit from with mental health funding, and I think that's another critical piece of what we're all looking at here as we're dealing with the unhoused and we're dealing with a number of problems that low-income families in our community are certainly facing.
I absolutely support coordinating funding. And I think it's really important that we recognize that money is only one tool in our toolbox. And in order to make great use of that funding, we have to actually work together. And a lot of these nonprofits work great together. But right now, our city and county are not working so well together. What we need is leadership that will bring people together, that will take ideas, that will help convene the excellent nonprofits that we have and help guide a facilitated conversation so that we set principles that lead to tangible outputs, not just studies. That money should be used well in a direction to ensure that we actually are housing people, that we're taking people off the streets, that we also are ensuring that the people who are currently in homes, no matter what they look like, can retain that roof over their heads. It's critical. And if we can't coordinate our principles and work towards something together, that money will not be used to its highest and best purpose.
All righty. So our next round of questions is going to focus on low-income housing. But before we transition into those questions, we're going to take a moment to report on our mentee survey. These are questions that the candidates provided. This first question was provided by Susan Sandberg. So that question was, although each is important, which of these housing supports do you believe is Bloomington's current immediate priority? And we had a choice of emergency shelter, transitional shelters, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. We had a total of 54 respondents, and I'll go ahead and report out on the results and give each of you an opportunity to respond to those results. So in the lead, we had 27 respondents for permanent supportive housing, 14 respondents for rapid rehousing, and a close third, transitional shelter, and 12, and then just one lonely person for emergency shelter. So, we'll keep the same order if you all had comments on those results. Yeah, if you had any commentary on the results that we got back, just the feedback. Okay.
No, that's not surprising to me. I was kind of thinking that rapid rehousing might be the number one, but yeah, interesting.
My only comment is that we have to live in balance because all of those services are needed in our community. And through my 3 decades of experience with housing, what I see is when we push funding towards one priority, something else comes out of balance, which is why this collaboration is so key, because we need a continuum of possibilities in our community.
All right, thank you. All right, so first question related to low-income housing. It's about housing choice vouchers. As you know, housing choice vouchers are an important tool for creating access to housing. The BHA reports that 40% of people with vouchers can't find landlords willing to accept those vouchers. What would you do as mayor to encourage more landlords to participate in the voucher program? And we'll start with Susan and Kerry, then Don.
Well, certainly, and again, being familiar with the BHA and the Section 8 housing vouchers, I'm very well aware that there are all the time recruiting efforts to try to get landlords to understand that this is a safe bet, that when people have the vouchers, they're going to get their rent, they're going to get paid, and that the individuals who are going to be renting from them are going to be good renters because there's education involved with that. I'm understanding that Heading Home is actually working with a landlord program, at least it's being piloted, I believe, to actually assist landlords maybe with some repair of their homes in order to, in exchange, to make sure that they are going to be able and willing to take on tenants who have these vouchers. And I think that's a step in the right direction. I would certainly encourage that because it is a critical need. You can get the voucher, which are competitive to get in the first place, I understand. And then if you're not able to use that voucher because you cannot find a landlord, this is a critical issue that the city of Bloomington can certainly help facilitate through our connections with organizations like Heading Home and others in the BHA.
I would take a two-pronged approach. First, I'm already working with an individual who is writing a handbook for how you can become a landlord for Section 8 vouchers. This is incredibly critical because our landlords need to understand what it entails, but also how to support families when they are in those homes, how communication is essential, and how really taking care of any challenges that you have right away can promote a great relationship, just as it does with any relationship. The second is to support landlords when there are problems. We can just anticipate that there will be problems in some of these residences because people have problems, families have problems. And so when we can support landlords tactically, when we can help with rental assistance when things go wrong, when we can help with conflict resolution and maintenance issues, then the renters can be successful and the landlords can be successful, and we can retain those families in those units.
Dealing with the risk is one way to help with some kind of insurance policy of some sort for clean out, training for not only the landlords but also the tenants is another form that could really help. But too much talk about landlords. Yeah, we want to continue and increase the amount of landlords, but I think we also have got to think about tenant advocacy because people less than folks that are really struggling have a tendency to get hurt by landlords. So advocating for tenants, but also making sure that we can find ways of for landlords to take on vouchers from the tenants is a great idea. Yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you. This next question focuses on our neighborhood institution, IU. What will you do to engage the IU administration in addressing housing costs? What ongoing role should IU play in dealing with the impact of student housing on the local housing market? We'll start with Kerry, then Don, and then Susan.
I'll start with a conversation. I think we need to open that door and open it wide so that we can understand what pressures IU is trying to meet with their faculty and students now in the housing market. But I think that we also just need to recognize that the city, when the city is lifted, IU also benefits. And we are in a relationship now that is a full-blown pressure cooker when it comes to housing. It is in both parties' best interest to have an open communication about what we anticipate in terms of housing needs in the future and currently, and how we can work together to ensure that people who work here can afford to live here. It is in everyone's best interest.
Part of our lack of housing has to do with the fact that IU has not increased the amount of housing for neither their students nor faculty. And so it is putting a strain on our community. So we do have to have several, and we've had several conversations with Indiana University in regards to housing. They know that they have a problem. We know that we have a problem. The county knows that they have that the county also has a problem. It is a regional, it's a regional problem, and we all need to get together and increase density in areas that are underutilized. And that also includes campus. There are several opportunities on campus to increase housing, not only for undergraduates, graduates, but also faculty. So more tough conversations need to be had with Indiana University.
Thank you. Relationships are always critically important when you're collaborating and when you are a city with a big university at its heart. I came here as an undergrad. I recently retired from the O'Neill School. I have good working relationships with the incredible faculty there, and I look forward to all meetings that I have with IU officials, and I have had several over the years, and just had one recently when we talked about this very thing, you know, IU real estate and Bloomington stresses and strains with affordable housing. I understand at IUPUI, for instance, there is a little bit of cooperation with that university and the city of Indianapolis because we realize that it's not just students who need housing, it's your staff. It's your faculty, and sometimes the staff are not all that highly paid, and they need affordable housing, just like permanent residents of Bloomington do. So it will be critical for us to sit down at the table, as we sit down with a lot of tables, to partner, to collaborate with our leaders at Indiana University to try to get to an understanding of how we can assist each other in making sure that the people they employ, the students that go to IU, and our residents here in the city of Bloomington have decent, affordable housing. We must work harder on getting those incentives in place that will encourage the development of and the rehabilitation and the preservation of the housing that we already have that's naturally affordable in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. What is your understanding of how a community land trust can create housing for low to moderate income residents? Do you support the land trust being created by the BHA and Summit Hill CDC? We'll start with Don, Susan, and Kerry. Sorry.
You know the answer to that, I think, but the public doesn't. Yes, land trust, if those don't know, it's a way to make sure that housing stays affordable by keeping the land with the city or whoever owns the land trust. And that way the price of land can be kept in check, or the price of the housing can be kept in check because the folks are not financing the actual land. It is something I support. It's a way to continue providing affordable housing. And in fact, it may be the only way, one of the only ways that we're going to be able to keep affordable housing for extended amounts of time. It's been done before in the RCA Park, and it was fine, but it did not have the resources from the city behind it. We've got opportunities in the Hopewell Center, which is now it's the old hospital, and we've got some other opportunities off of 17th Street. But yes, more land purchases like that are what I think we need to do.
The cost of housing, of course, do rely on a lot of different costs that developers have in producing such housing. And the cost of land is critical. So a land trust model does absolutely make sense. If you take that off the table, you're going to produce housing that is much more affordable than market rates, where they're having to purchase whatever the market rate for the land is, in addition to get their banking in line, in addition to the rising cost of materials that it takes to build housing. So a land trust model absolutely makes sense. The more we can reduce the cost of new developments, the better. And so I fully support the Summit model. I am very much looking forward to the development of the Hopewell neighborhood. I have high hopes that we are working with the right people who understand how to bring in affordable housing, who know how to leverage tax credits in order to get that done. And the more we can reduce costs for developers, I think that's going to bring some prices down.
I conceptually support the land trust model, and I don't want to put people at risk. And there is a very important issue that needs to be solved if we want to make this a success. We have had a model like this in Bloomington, and it failed. And this time we need to make it a success. And in order to do that, we need lenders at the table who understand this model and who will guarantee that if the resident needs to move out of that unit, that they will provide lending for the next resident. After the housing crash of 2009, when lending completely pivoted, our mortgage lenders had to comply with completely new regulations. That was good on the whole, but it makes it very difficult to resell a house in a land trust model. We need to have, I would suggest, a lenders symposium so that we can attract the right lending pool that can guarantee these homeowners that if they need to move, if they want to move, that they can. Because housing is about people. It's not about buildings. We need to ensure that those people can succeed.
Thank you. Next question. What zoning changes would you propose to foster development of low-income housing? Susan, Kerry, Don.
Thank you. I currently feel, and of course I was instrumental in the whole Unified Development Ordinance as it was being changed into its current state. I'm not quite sure we've got the incentives correct when we are incentivizing the developers of the larger multifamily apartment complexes. If you check off certain boxes for sustainability, for instance, you get an extra story. If you check off a box to do certain units in workforce development, you'll get an extra story. I don't know that that's the right way to go about it. I would like to see changes in the UDO that do reflect a need to keep core neighborhoods where, again, affordable housing is kind of naturally occurring in the smaller homes, to put more emphasis on rehabilitating those homes, preserving those homes, and protecting those homes. So those are some changes that I would like to see made in the UDO to once again incentivize the kind of housing that we actually need for people in lower income ranges than some of the incentives we have in place right now that I don't see working as well as they were possibly intended when those changes were made. Density in and of itself, density makes sense where density makes sense. But that alone is not going to bring the cost of housing down. Just building more. I think we've all kind of bought into this somewhat of a trickle-down theory. Build it, and somehow the prices of other housing will come down. We've not seen that, and that's largely because we live in a college town. So there are changes we could make. We could make things more affordable for people doing affordable housing.
Can you give me the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what zoning changes would you propose to foster development of low-income housing?
Oh.
So for the last 9 years I was CEO of Habitat, we were actually the largest private home developer in the county. I've done a lot of developing and a lot of building here in Bloomington. And there are several things that can help make housing more affordable. On my website, I have a 5-point housing plan. I'm going to encourage you to read that because I can't cover it in 90 seconds. But briefly, during the UDO process, for instance, I authored a resolution that required 1/2 of the duplexes to be rented at an affordable rate. Susan worked closely with me on that resolution. That would have ensured that we did have more affordable units in these neighborhoods when they become duplexes. In my housing plan, one of the other things I have suggested is that we create a navigation system that makes our zoning code completely transparent so that there are not $250,000 of changes after Plan Commission. We should have a very clear zoning code. It can be very restrictive, but the end user pays for those changes. If we want affordable housing, we should ensure that builders and developers can see exactly what they need to do at the outset to make these units affordable.
We need to increase density in areas that are underutilized. The planning department, along with the utilities and HAND, have mapped out areas in Bloomington that are underutilized, that may have 1 acre on the property, or one house on the property on 2 acres. There are all kinds of opportunities within the city limits to increase density. There are other ways we need to, there are other products that are out there. And I'm going to say it, I'm going to say plexes. I think plexes are actually a good idea. Who is a core neighborhood? I think we need to stop saying that. I think all of our neighborhoods are core neighborhoods, are good neighborhoods. And I think there's opportunity. Look, there's only 38% of folks within city limits own a house. That's ridiculous, 38%. People will say, well, we've got a bunch of students, so of course there's only 30. No, it's the fact that no one else can afford to live within city limits, so they have to live outside of them. We've got to change that. Density is a key. We've got to get rid of this height restriction that we have. We've got a height restriction of 40 feet. That's in some areas, that's not good.
Thank you. All right, this is last question on this topic. How do you plan to deploy the city's housing development fund? And would you restructure it in any way? We'll start with Kerry and Don.
Back to the collaboration, I think that we need to have a good planning session with all of the affordable housing providers to set priorities for that fund. And then we need to actively deploy it. It's very simple. We have great folks who are already seeking to fill this need. We should be working with them and asking what we can do to add more people to provide those services, but also to ask what's missing. Where is the gap? We need attainable housing at all levels right now in the city of Bloomington. And in order to do that, we need to work together. We need to take that housing study that we did in 2020 off the shelf and write a tactical, strategic plan to ensure that we get at least those 2,700 units created. And we need to do that in partnership with the people who already are working hard to serve our residents.
We have the money, we have the will, we need better projects, and we may need to figure out how we use that money. Is the problem down payment assistance, to do especially when it comes to affordable housing and affordable, attainable housing. Should we consider helping a small developer with down payment? It takes 20 to 30% to purchase an investment property. Do we help out with that? There are other ways that we can use that money. I think it's a great program. I really do. We've gotten over 1,400 units, affordable units over the last 6 years with this program. And countless other opportunities. So it's not something, before we talk about breaking it, we really need to know, folks really need to know how it works, because it's working very, very well.
The Housing Development Fund is a good idea. I supported it as a member of the council. And it comes about in large part because the state of Indiana does tie our hands in the city of Bloomington. We are not allowed by law to have what's called inclusionary zoning, in which we require anyone developing housing to do anything related to affordability. We cannot make them. We cannot put anything in code that says you will, bring affordable housing to our community. So the Housing Development Fund was developed for them to voluntarily contribute into that fund, so the city of Bloomington would have some funds to be able to do things with. That is somewhat limited in its scope. Our hands are also tied in that we have very few tools. We can do tax abatements, we can things of that nature. We can certainly incentivize affordable housing builders to do housing that is less market rate and more in line with Bloomington's salaries. But we are doing everything we can to incentivize, and I think our best strategies are to identify who are the builders that are affordable housing builders. There are some around that we can build relationships with. And of course, we need to identify where are the proper sites where this kind of housing can be developed. Is the infrastructure there to support it? And then, is the city willing to work with the developers to make sure that's the case? Last but not least, we do need to coordinate with our county officials and make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can within our ability legally to provide incentives for affordable housing. It's difficult. We don't always have the ability to get the things that we know we want and that we absolutely need.
We're going to move on to questions focused on homelessness, but before we do, just going to report out on the second audience question. The question was submitted by Kerry Thomson. Though all levels of government play a role, do you think the key solution to the systemic problem of homelessness is primarily a matter for local, state, or federal government? By far the most respondents, 42, said local government. 13 said state government, and 5 said federal government. I find that very interesting, given the amount of federal funding that comes to support programs that address homelessness. But what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts about that question? And yeah, sure, Don.
Okay. It's time to stop pointing fingers. It's something that state, federal, city, and county need to work together on. We've got funding. You're right. We need more. And let's remember, this is a mental health. I think we've got to stop calling it the homeless. I mean, that's a small part. This is a mental health and substance abuse crisis. And if we're talking about homelessness, then we need to broaden who we think. When we thinking about homeless, we need to broaden that. That's the 18-year-old that is out of care. They're out of. They've been kicked out of. That's the baby. That's the mom that just had a baby. There's a lot of people we need to think of when we're saying homeless, because it has a much bigger meaning. But anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off topic a little bit, but yes, it's something, mental health is something that we need to look at as not only a city, but a state and a county and a national thing.
Well, as an elected official at the local level, that is a bit surprising to me because, again, I see our role as a facilitation role, and it takes all of us. It takes all of the individuals in our nonprofit organizations that are serving the underserved, that are serving low-income residents in our community, including the unhoused. It is state programs that we absolutely need to bring in the additional funding and the additional leadership from state government. And last but not least, HUD. I mean, our federal government that does provide so much funding for so much of what we do on behalf of community and family resources in our hand department. And so it takes the private sector as well. We've got a lot of generosity in this community when it comes to fundraising for the nonprofits who are serving the underserved, and for us to partner with at the local level to do everything we possibly can to facilitate, to provide leadership, to be at the tables when the discussions are happening. How do we all, as a community, raise the funding necessary to provide the shelters and the supportive housing and the rehousing programs and the mental health programs? Because I agree with Don that it is absolutely critical to address all of the reasons why we face a community that's having to deal with an increase in homelessness, which comes in many different reasons as to why that is.
I'm going to agree with Don and Susan that it does take us all. And I asked the question because I thought that in Bloomington, we really wanted a local solution. And indeed, the statistics show that we do. We want that local solution because we're Bloomington and we care. And we keep looking at a challenge that we think we should be able to solve this, but it feels like it's getting too big. I don't think it's too big for us. I think we just need to work in new and innovative ways with the phenomenal people who have been doing this work. I think that Bloomington probably proportionately has a higher percentage of street homelessness right now than many other places in Indiana. And you know what? We're a caring enough community that we could really say, instead of being scared of that or running away from that or saying we don't want that, we could instead say, how do we embrace this challenge and make Bloomington the city that cares so deeply that we solve it, and the rest of the country looks at us for the model for how we did it?
All right, thank you. Now we're going to move on to questions about this topic. A business owner calls you to complain about a person who is sleeping on their store's stoop. What do you tell them? And we'll start with you, Don, and Susan Kerry.
Of course, this is a call that I, as deputy mayor, I would get, our office would get constantly on a daily basis. So it's not a theory for me, but here's the thing. We have got to start both sides, whether they're business owners, folks that live downtown, and folks who advocate for those that are unhoused. We've got to start talking to each other. There's a lot of them or, you know, this or them, and we've got to do a better job. But first I ask, is that person okay? That's the first thing that needs to be asked. Is that person okay? And then we try to get resources for them. Before police come, we try to get social workers and folks that are not necessarily uniform to talk to that individual. But it really depends. But this happens so often, and we've got to do a better job. We've got to sit people in a room and talk about that one true thing. First, start with that one. Before any yelling happens, let's talk. That's what I'm saying.
Well, this is certainly the reality when you are responsible for the city of Bloomington, and everyone who lives here, everyone who's trying to do business here, feels safe in their homes here, is dealing with issues such as this. And I think we have evolved as a community in doing this in a much more gentle way, if you will, by our own community policing standards for incorporating, it used to be called the downtown resource officers. Now those have been kind of rolled into our new programming where we have social workers embedded, we have community specialists involved, and we also have good places to refer people to who need to have redress for these kinds of circumstances. I've mentioned the Stride Center, 24/7 operation that is partnered largely by Centerstone and Cook, who have helped sponsor that program, where our police officers, if they are called to some scene like that, they have places and they know how to deal with the unhoused and folks that maybe are causing some disturbances or disruptions for neighborhoods or businesses. And that's done in a much more humane and responsible way because we do have more resources available and more nonprofit organizations that can also be a part of how do we help individuals who need to be in a shelter situation and not on a street.
I think this is a call that the mayor's office probably gets a lot, and this is the challenge that has seemingly not changed in many years, and I think that there are probably more of these calls than there used to be. From an outsider's perspective, not having been the deputy mayor before or served on council, what I hear is frustration in the community that there is no place genuinely that can help in crisis situations. We have great emergency shelter, we have great family shelter, we have Beacon, but when a business calls, they want partnership. And they want to know, and the business owners I have talked to, they want to deal with people, with the human beings with dignity. And we have to create that path. I have, and I will continue to talk to people who are unhoused about what it is that they need and what resources might meet their needs. I will also talk to the business owners about what challenges are existing and how the city can genuinely help. The police have told me they actually don't know what to do. We need a change.
Yeah, okay. How will you address encampments on the city's public land? Start with Susan? No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Susan, Kerry, Don.
Encampments on public land are always difficult. There are matters of legality where people are allowed to be and not allowed to be. This is a question that comes up that really there is no answer for. When the encampments themselves become unsafe and unsanitary, I've certainly seen what has happened when you have to move them from one place to another. I think some of the timing of some of the movements have been unfortunate. I think what lessons the city has learned about that is to make sure there's adequate notice given when someone has to be moved from a place where they are not legally allowed to be and where it's causing issues either for sanitation or for nearby property owners who want that removed. But giving adequate notice, making sure that the organizations who support people who are unhoused are made aware of an effort to move people out. that has to be better coordinated, and unfortunately, it's something that has to be done from time to time. It's unpleasant. I know with the case of the DNR move, the one that was down in the Lower Cascades area, I did visit that encampment. I did see the conditions there, and DNR certainly had the authority and certainly felt the need to get that cleared and moved away. So that's a reality that we have to also address. How do we do that in a more humane fashion and in a fashion that actually provides for where they're going to go next?
This is a situation that I actually faced when I was CEO of Habitat. We had a piece of property that we were set to start creating a new neighborhood on, and I knew there was an encampment, and so I spent many days walking to the encampment and meeting different people, because there are different people there on different days, and telling them about our plans and the timeline. And then I reached out to the various partners, including Centerstone and the shelters and Beacon, to talk about what services could be provided and how we could get the word out even better for when this move needed to happen. We posted placards on trees, we worked with partners, we talked directly to the people who were sleeping there, and by the time that we needed to get in there to start developing, everybody had willingly moved, and they had all been offered a solution. This is possible. This is possible in Bloomington. We can treat people with dignity, not pull up the sanitation trucks and shred tents. And I believe that if we do, and we can create those solutions for where they can go next, we will stop just saying, not here. Instead, we can say, you can be here, instead of just where you cannot be.
There actually are plans in place. There's, we as a city, and in our cities, in our parks, we currently say that there are no encampments on city property. And we give 10 to 14 days. We send out our partners within the community and try to get people counseling. We make sure that there are places for folks to go. These encampments are dangerous. They're unsanitary. We've had murders. We've had people die. We don't know if they're murders or not. We've had people get sick. We've had rapes. It's not sustainable on a public park or a public street. And in my administration, and keep in mind, I feel that if there are encampments that are off city property, that like the island, that are off city property, that we need to do a better job of helping facilitate those folks, having health checks, making sure that it's sanitary. Sorry.
What is your position about adding more public restrooms in the downtown area? And we'll start with Kerry, then Don, then Susan.
I think many of us have been in situations where we wish we could find a public restroom not at a time that we happen to be going in and eating somewhere. So I think the city would be well served with some additional public restrooms.
Yeah, we have to treat everyone with dignity. Everyone, and I mean everyone, has to use the restroom. And just because someone doesn't have a home to do it in does not mean we can prevent them from doing that. So they're going to go, they're going on the side of buildings. We have got to do it. No one wants that. So yes, more bathrooms, more centrally located bathrooms, more accessible bathrooms. It is a problem cleaning the ones that we do have. It is a problem, but I think we've got to continue. We can't be afraid to do the right thing.
Well, I think with the addition of the 4th Street Garage and the Trades Garage, those do have restrooms, do they not, that are publicly available? That is, of course, in the downtown. And I know it's difficult when there are places, there are commercial, there are restaurants that do not allow public use of their restrooms unless you're a patron of the restaurant. The issue then does become the maintenance and the care and the making sure that those are in locations where individuals may need them nearby. We certainly do not want to see unsanitary conditions crop up in the streets, and so it makes sense to take a look wherever we have a public park or a public amenity to have a bathroom that is available to all people and not necessarily people that are patrons in a restaurant. So it's a good thing to take a look at, but it does require some care and some maintenance and some funding, and the city has to be mindful as to where those can be.
All right. There was a local media outlet that recently asked candidates about how you would address homelessness. Don, in your response, you stated, and I quote, "We need to treat people in the social work field like we treat our firefighters, police officers, and other essential workers," end quote. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that and what you would do to make it happen? And then for Susan and Kerry, do you agree with that approach?
So, again, and keep in mind, essential workers, we need them, right? Our police and fire get $18,000 a year to live in Bloomington for down payment assistance, or $750 a month for rental assistance if they want to live in Bloomington, because it's so expensive to live in Bloomington. We've got, we don't have enough folks in social work, and the ones that are in the social working field are being overwhelmed. Absolutely overwhelmed and underpaid. No offense, because but they can't afford to live here in Bloomington. So if we want more folks in that field, and we need them here in Bloomington, we've got to figure that out. Are we going to give them rental assistance? Should we help them with a first-time home buyer program of some sorts and down payment assistance? I think we've got to do more if we want to solve this problem. We can have all these ideas, and we do. We have great people and great organizations, but there's not enough of us, especially if we want to take it to the next level, which is trying to be the best at handling and helping everyone. If that's our goal, we can't do it with the amount of people that we currently have.
Could I get a repeat of the question, because I'm not clear? Are we talking about at the city of Bloomington, social workers at the city, or all across the board?
My understanding of that question and the context was that it was talking about social workers in general, not city-employed social workers.
Well, certainly as someone who has worked in the social services, I could not agree more that social workers need to be paid better. Any caregiver needs to be paid better, whether you're a child care worker, or you're working with the elderly, you're working with low-income people. It's a profession that is traditionally rather low paid. And related to how much money other professionals make within the city, whether it's police, whether it's fire, whether it's our AFSCME workers, whether it's our dispatch workers. Certainly if we're speaking about from a city of Bloomington perspective and a finance perspective and a budgeting perspective, we want to make sure that we are paying our workers a competitive wage so that we can keep them, so that we can retain them, so that we can make sure that the professionals that we have working for you at the city of Bloomington are making a fair and living wage. I don't know what the city of Bloomington can do about the wage inequity issues as to social workers being very lowly paid, which they clearly are. And they're some of our most valuable people who work for our communities, and I'm just not sure exactly how we deal with that wage disparity.
So if I understand the question correctly, paying social workers more will help with the challenge of healing people who are in need of housing? Is that, I'm sorry.
I think Don, and don't let me speak for you, Don, if this is wrong. I think he was referring to the social workers who work in agencies that support services for homeless.
Yes, so my approach to this would be that we certainly need incredible talent at all of these agencies. And part of that talent is social workers. And certainly part of how you attract and retain people is how much you pay them. And that's not the only thing that goes into retaining a great team. Part of it is having a mission that everybody understands exactly what their piece is so that they know that they're contributing to something tremendous that's moving the world. Another part is how your team interacts and how they're appreciated and can understand that they bring value and that they themselves are valued in that team. So we're talking about pay disparity in many of the services in Bloomington right now. We're looking at firefighters and police that, we're understaffed in many areas. And I think we certainly need to look at pay to retain the workers that we need. And we need to look at the rest of it as well. People need to know that they have a boss that has their back. They need to know exactly what's expected of them, and they need to have the resources to get it done. So I think pay would be something to consider, and there are probably other levers as well.
All right, thank you. Final question in this category. What is the single most important thing that you will champion to end homelessness in our community? And we'll start with Susan.
I think it's clear that we do quite a bit in this community through our very rich nonprofit networks and the funding that we're able to collaborate with city and county and the ARPA money and Recover Forward. We've done as good a job as we can to address the issue of homelessness. I am thinking, in addition to the harm reduction techniques that are clearly important, we want to make sure that Narcan is available. We do not want people ODing. We do not want people suffering with untreated mental illness. We don't want people living on our streets in unsafe and inhumane conditions. I think we do need to focus more on the mental health care aspect. We need to do a better job of finding the funding sources. Hopefully more are on the horizon. To be able to have community mental health centers that can help not only with the immediate need to get people into housing, but to help people get healthy, help people become self-sufficient, help people get to a point where they are better able to take advantage of rehousing and the various programs, fortunately headed up by Heading Home, and the array of everyone in this community that's working diligently to focus on the unhoused. But I think mental health is going to be a significant key for better funding for some of the gaps that we're currently experiencing. And the capacity issue, too, we've got to take a look at that.
The single most important thing for ending homelessness is to support Heading Home, which is doing an incredible job of creating an umbrella and giving us direction as a community so that the service providers can collaborate and that they don't have to do the heavy lifting of the convening and the umbrella planning. I will agree that we also, I think, need an equal effort when it comes to mental health and substance use. And that is critical work, but people need to be in shelter before they can have healing in mental health and substance use. So we know, and we have committed as a community to the Housing First model. We know it's very hard to do anything else when that basic need is not met. We must meet that basic need. That's why Heading Home is here. And there are a myriad of other things, mental health being one of them, that also need to be done in our community.
Yeah, Heading Home. I mean, we have a lot of plans within the city of Bloomington. We have our sustainability plan. We have, there's always a plan. That other people have worked on, very smart people have worked on. Heading Home, there's a plan already in place, and we need to lean into it. This Built for Zero community of 100 folks or 100 communities that you're working on. I think that's really important. Well, first focusing on the folks that are veterans, but then I think the youth, the 18 to 23-year-olds, I want to really focus in on that as well. But also just, we've got to stop using our jails as a mental health facility. So we as a community, once again, we can't say this is the county's problem and it's not the state. We've got to bind together and figure out wraparound services and really push for that around the jail. All right, we can't use it as a mental health facility anymore. So if I can be a champion of that and a champion of what the people that are already working in the field.
All right, thank you. All right, so move on from that segment. We'll report on our final audience question and then segue into closing statements. This last question was posed by candidate Don Griffin. We had a total of 58 respondents. Are we as a community scared of being the best at taking care of those that are less fortunate? And we had a perfect split on that question, 50-50, which tells us that many folks think there's things we're doing well, and maybe not so well. Is that maybe what you expected, Don, or?
I think that my whole belief in Bloomington means that we find a benchmark and we do the best at the things that are important to us as Bloomingtonians. And I think we're scared to be the best at taking care of folks with mental health and substance abuse and unhoused issues. I think we're scared that it will bring in more people that will also seek our assistance. And that is scary for some people because, and even folks who are working in the industry who are already overworked and underpaid. And that's one of the reasons why we need to get ready. If we're going to do this, we need to do it the right way. And I think that scares a few people. That's what I think.
I'm not sure that scared is the right word here. I know in my experiences both in working as a case manager and doing social service work and working closely with many of the nonprofits who do here in the community, I have a sense of pride about that. I've always bragged about the fact that Bloomington is a generous community. It's a caring community. We care for our people. I think what I wish other cities would do throughout the state is do an equally good job of using their resources and their community strengths to take care of their individuals, because let's not mistake it. When you are a community that cares and you do provide a lot of services, you're going to attract individuals from other communities who come here. I started to say in my last answer, one of our issues is a capacity issue. I mean, we can be such a caring community that we don't have the capacity now to take care of all of the issues that maybe other cities and towns are sending our way because they know when they come to Bloomington, they're going to have some food security because of Community Kitchen and Hoosier Hills and Mother Hubbard's Cupboard. They're going to be able to get health care because of our tremendous, it used to be called Volunteers in Medicine. Now it's HealthNet. We do have shelter opportunities. We do have Heading Home. We do have Beacon, Wheeler, the Stride Center. We are a tremendous community when it comes to that, and I wouldn't change that. But it is creating some issues, so I'm not sure scared is the word. We can't deny that that's happening.
I think the 50-50 split is likely a representation of the fact that our community does care, and we want to be really good at this. And we also are a little bit scared that if we get too good at it, then we are going to be attracting people. But what if we believed we actually could solve the problem? What if Built for Zero really does work? What if working together, we can create a system where we can have people who are unhoused for just a brief and non-repeatable time? I think we can do that, but we have to work together. And we have to work with the other communities so that they understand the resources they need to help the people that are already in their communities.
Thank you. All right, we're going to transition into final statements. We're doing great on time. Great on time. All right. We want to thank you all for coming out to help us understand your positions on low-income housing and homelessness. And now we'd like to hear closing statements. We're going to give each of you a minute to share your final thoughts. We have Kerry, then Don, and then Susan.
I've been in Bloomington for more than 25 years, and my happiest point, my most fulfilled point, happened to have been when I was both a single mom for a decade and working a lifestyle job trying to solve dilapidated housing for our entire city. I'm not afraid of the hard work. I'm not afraid of a problem that seems like it may be intractable, because what I know how to do really well is take our collective ideas and weave a vision and then invite people into a magnetic process where they know what their part can be in helping us achieve the things that people said were impossible. We can do that with housing in Bloomington. We can also do that with the many opportunities that we have in our community. Because we are incredible, we can do it together.
Bloomington is going to change. Are we ready for it? Because if we go forward without a plan of action, yes, our quality of life will get better. We will have more amenities and better parks, but we need more housing, and we need to attract better paying jobs. We will continue to attract more people from the East Coast and the West Coast and beyond. But in a great haste to improve, we can't continue this trend of becoming a community of haves and have-nots, pushing people out along with the heart, character, and vibe that makes folks want to stay here in the first place. We must become a place that is accessible to all. We must become a place that raises up the least of us. We must become the best version of ourselves, a better Bloomington for every single one of us.
Bloomington is fortunate to have effective programs providing both temporary shelters and housing stability for the unhoused. I support the good efforts of Heading Home, a data-driven program designed to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-repeating. Recovery and treatment housing options need more funding. The mental health needs of many of our unhoused can be a stronger focus to assist with better health and healing outcomes. We currently have many wheels in motion, and this will not be fixed overnight. We are on a path that will require regional efforts. Our lack of affordable housing requires immediate, comprehensive, and bold action. The Sandberg administration will be committed to working with those already on the ground in order to create a lasting systemic response that ensures homelessness is prevented wherever possible. Thank you for caring. I will appreciate your support in the upcoming primary on May 2. Thank you.
Our candidates. Let's give our candidates a round of applause. Thank you.